For years I've thought about painting a barn. Being a native Hoosier and born on a small farm and spending summers at my grandparents' farms, I grew up playing in barns and being around them. So I'm just kind of surprised I've never painted one until now. After getting the basic sketch drawn in using vine charcoal, I overpainted that with watered down burnt sienna. The next step was to get the base coats down, primarily the sky. I wanted to do a glazing technique and have the sky be darker on the right side, a little lighter on the light side, instead of the usual vertical light to dark that you see most of the time. Kind of gives a hint of an approaching storm, perhaps. I'm not showing all the steps here, but I believe it was about 7 layers of paint to get the sky values. A lot of times it was coating the canvas purely with water and letting the paint lie and transfuse through that moist surface. By the way, my water jar comes from an old Miracle Whip bottle from the mid-60s when I was still in high school, and I've been using it ever since. I love looking at clouds, and I take a lot of photos of clouds. And I did use a series as a reference for this, but the important thing that I wanted to do in creating the shapes of the clouds was keeping in mind where my center of interest was going to be and using the clouds as a compositional element to help guide the eye into the center of interest. I thought long and hard before starting this painting. I was inspired by a view just outside of the correctional industrial facility where I teach an advanced art class. So I've been passing by this area for 3 years. Finally stopped and took my series of 3 photos that you saw earlier. But I just didn't want to do a plain, ordinary Indiana landscape. That's just not what I do. But I had to have the right meaning and the symbolism all in place before I could start. I had already begun a series of paintings that for now are being called a portal series. And it wasn't until I was comfortable with realizing that this landscape could be a continuation of that idea that I was able to begin. I had already been exploring the different ways to communicate visually the theoretical physics of multiple dimensions, like in my superstring theory painting and many others before that, really, that I was comfortable to use that concept in this painting. Once again, I am slightly altering the reality of the actual field. The lines of the rows of the grasses and plants weren't really like this, but I am angling my texture to go along with my center of interest again, as you'll see in a few minutes. Now, I've always thought that I am not that fussy with color like some artists are. But as I'm doing this foreground green color, I found that I ended up using a lot of different colors to come up with the exact shade that I wanted. Those include Hooker's green, phthalocyanine green, yellow oxide, Turner's yellow, cadmium yellow medium, white, burnt sienna, and bronze yellow. This is plain water that's going on now to give me a nice watercolor effect as I build up my portal sphere with transparent landscape. Many times I use an airbrush for skies and effects like this, But for this painting, I wanted to get away from anything so refined, and I do so many digital paintings that for this one I wanted everything to be strictly with brush. The big challenge for this stage of the painting was, one, not making any mistakes, because they would literally not be able to be successfully undone, at least not to my satisfaction. But the other part is getting the right degree of transparency. Along with always wanting to paint a barn, there's a section of Indiana that I've always wanted to paint, and that's just north of Greensburg, heading south on I-74. When I was a little kid, that highway was built, and there's a section that has always been so dramatic in my eye. So now when I've needed a second landscape, I thought, even though I didn't have any photo references of it, that I would go ahead and capture the impression of that area. It may not be exact, because after all, the angle of the road is subject to my rules of composition, even within this smaller interior landscape. The final step is to use Lineco's archival quality adhesive that will be the foundation for the fine-grained sand that I got from the Stone Center. And now it's finished. I hope you've enjoyed watching how Landscape with Barn and Dimensional Portal was put together.